Welcome back to A Game of Things and Thrones. My name's Hannah, and this is the start of, hopefully, a new series on my channel. Now, you all know I read a lot, I buy a lot. I probably buy too much, and this is an attempt to curb the book buying that I do, as well as cut down that never-ending TBR pile, to try and, just make sure I am reading the books I'm buying. So, this isn't a new challenge by any means. I have seen it on Bookstagram. I can't remember who from, so I do apologise. But basically, it is what it says on the tin. You read 7 books and then you buy 1. So just to keep me on track, and because I don't want to sit doing half-hour long hauls and half-hour long reading wrap-ups, because one, by the time the end of the month gets here, I've forgotten what I've read at the beginning of the month, which isn't always the book's fault. And 2, same with the book hauls. I don't want to buy loads because this is the only book space I have. There's not a lot of room left on these shelves. What you can't see is the TBR trolley that has the 3 shelves are full, and then there are books stacked on top of that as well. And I have unread books on my Kindle, which, to be honest, the unread books on the Kindle, they are mostly cheaper and they are more space saving, so they're not so much a priority as the physical books. But that being said, I am probably going to buy more Kindle books than physical, just for space and many reasons. But I think I've rambled on long enough, so this is the first ever episode of Read 7 by 1. So, first book was actually a Kindle book. I read The Crow Trap by Anne Cleves. This is the first in the Vera series, and I'm 99% sure that this was meant to be a standalone, but people really enjoyed Vera, so Anne brought her back. Now, it is set in sort of Northumberland, North Tyneside, where I'm from. Well, technically I'm from South Tyneside, Tyne and Weir, but it is set in the northeast, so I do recognise some of where the characters go. But basically, this introduces Vera, who is a bit of an unconventional detective. She's a bit Sherlock in the way that she works things out, but she looks more like Columbo. She's a bit raggedy, a bit of a, I think, as she's actually introduced, I think one of our characters calls her a bag lady. Hang on. I don't have COVID, I have hay fever, and it's messing with the pressure in my ears. Anyway, so in The Crow Trap, obviously we are introduced to Vera. She is called upon to solve a series of, the main crux of this matter is that there is a proposed quarry going to be built in an area of, don't know if it's outstanding natural beauty or scientific interest, but the Wildlife Trust have arranged for 3 women who are particular experts in their field. We have a bird watcher, a botanist, and a mammal mammalist, either way. And these 3 women all have to work together to see if there is anything anything that the quarry would destroy. So that could be like a rare bird or an established colony, that kind of thing. So we have that. But at the start of the book, our main perspective, and I cannot for the life of me remember any names, I'm sorry, but other than Vera, one of our main perspectives, the cottage where they stay is owned by her friend, who is an not elderly, but she's an older woman. I think she's maybe mid-40s, early 50s maybe. And she supposedly commits suicide. Now, Rachel, that's her name. Sorry. Rachel doesn't believe that this woman would do it. She loves her husband, who's had a stroke, and she's caring for him. She is his sole carer. So what sort of happens is we learn more about this woman's past, Rachel's past, Anne, who is the botanist, and it's not Emma. And then obviously we learn about the mammalist's past. I don't think that's the right term, but I'm going with it. While they all try to solve the case of, was the older woman murdered, or was it suicide, as well as that kind of thing. What interested me, what I found really intriguing, was we don't actually hear from Vera until like the last quarter of the book, because it is told from each of the three women's perspective. Rachel, Anna, and that woman I cannot remember. It's told from their perspective, and then we jump into Vera for the conclusion. But I thought I really enjoyed it. I just can't remember names, but I remember the details, and I did like how everything was tied together and the mystery was solved, and I did like Vera's character, and I will be continuing on. The third book, I think, is on Kindle Unlimited. But yeah, I give that one 4 stars. The next book, and this is the start of the Royal Readathon weekend. I have a vlog on it if you're interested. But basically I had a bingo board and I had to fill prompts. And I read 5 books for that. Well, 4.5, but I'm counting the 5th one as part of it. So they are Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a male romance between Alex, who is the son of the first female president of the United States, and Henry, who is the Prince of England. I thought this was okay. I did enjoy the romance element of it. It is fairly fade to black, which I don't tend to read erotica very much, so that was a nice touch for me personally. But I did only give it 3 stars because I think it got bogged down by the politics of this. But bear in mind, it is mostly set in Washington, and it does delve into, I don't want to say purely American politics, because yes, okay, but there were issues that maybe an American audience would get more out of than an English woman. My personal opinion, but I do really like the writing. I enjoyed the story. It isn't enemies to lovers as such, but it's more, I don't like you, you don't like me, what are we going to do? Because Alex and his sister and their best friend and their mum are all invited to the royal wedding, and because Alex and Henry have a history of antagonism, maybe I think is the right word, anything that is seen as a negative impact is picked up by the press and they run with it. So there is an incident and there is an altercation in which the wedding cake ends up on the floor, and Henry and Alex are left as the culprits. I mean, they are, but it is an honest misunderstanding that the press obviously gets the wrong idea of. So I did give it 3 stars, and I did like this. A 3 star for me isn't a bad rating, it just means it was okay. And I need to blow my nose again. I swear it's not COVID, it's hay fever. So I apologise for the sniffing and nose touching in this video. But then I picked up Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. This got 4 stars, but I think this is more my style than a purely contemporary romance, because this has magical realism, time travel vibes. But basically we follow Joan, who is half Chinese, half English. Her English family don't tend to get on with, don't tend to speak to her Malay family very often, and in summer she's sent by her father to spend that with her family in London on her mum's side, and they are a little bit eccentric. So she's making the most of it. She volunteers at a historical house, and things go from there. She falls in love with her colleague, a fellow volunteer called Nick. Yep, and he asks her on a date, but as she's getting ready for that date, something happens and she ends up jumping forward in time, not knowing how. So then it transpires that her whole family are monsters. Now, what that means isn't fully explained, but there is a sequel, so I'm hoping it might dive more into that aspect of it in the sequel. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a story of how this works, why this works. It's a story of Joan finding out who she is and what it means to be human, basically, because she is a half human, half monster. There's also, and it turns out that Nick, her cute crush, is a monster hunter, and he, for reasons, slaughters Joan's family, and she ends up meeting Aaron, who is the heir to another monster family. Now, this monster family is the Olivers, and they don't get on with Joan's family, who are I cannot remember what it's called. The Hunts. They don't get on at all, and what happens is a race through time to try and stop the massacre, try and set right wrongs that have happened historically, and it did wrap everything up nicely, while still leaving enough threads for the sequel, which I probably will pick up eventually. So 4 stars for this one, purely because it's more my jam than a straight romance. Straight. A contemporary romance where romance is the main plot and theme and draw. But speaking of a romance I did enjoy, this is Heartstopper Volume 3. Now this deals with Nick and Charlie. Charlie is openly gay. At the start of this is Volume 3, so I can't talk too much about it. But Charlie is officially gay. He was sort of outed before he was ready at school. I think he's in an all-boys school, and then things from there just didn't. No, he's in a mixed school, that's it. And people didn't really take to his coming out very well. He was bullied for it. But then he meets Nick, and they start to develop feelings. So this is a story of sexuality, because obviously Charlie is gay. He's outwardly gay. He knows it, and he has came out publicly, admittedly not in the way that he wanted. And then we have Nick. Now Nick, at the start of the series, likes girls, but then he develops feelings for Charlie, which leads him to determine and to question and to decide for now that the label that best fits him is bisexual. But in the third book, the third volume, I'm a little bit nervous as how much I can actually say, because I know that this is getting popularity because the Netflix adaptation, as it should, because it is beautiful. The It's just nice and simple, nice big panels. Not a lot of text, but it gets the point in the story across. But in this one, we see that Nick is dealing with some internalized issues due to how his coming out was. I don't want to say received, because I think that's the wrong terminology, but because the way that it went down for Nick was a little bit out of control, a little bit traumatic. He is internalizing that, and it is coming out in the form of an eating disordered eating, an unhealthy relationship to food. And Charlie, bless him, he is so sweet. All he wants to do is make sure that Nick, all Nick wants to do is make sure that Charlie is happy and that he is eating a little bit at least. But the way he does it is so sweet. He doesn't ask, he asks the right questions that I feel, bearing in mind I don't have eating disorder, but I think when people comment on weight and things, it does get a little bit close to the bone, if you pardon the expression. So Nick notices that Charlie isn't eating very much, and all he does is he packs food that he knows Charlie's going to like, and shares his food, takes him away to a quiet place so that they can eat without people staring or anything, or just like anything like that, so that Nick can do everything at his own pace. And I think that it is going to get mentioned more in the later volumes, and I have heard that while Alice Oseman deals with different mental health illness disorders in each of her books, they are always well done. But I mean, just check with Own Voices reviewers first, because like I say, I have anxiety and I have struggled with depression, but all okay now, fingers crossed. So I can't talk for eating disordered eating, but I can talk for the anxiety rep in this, the low mood rep. And for me personally, I think it was very well done, and I can't fault how Nick reacted and how supportive of a friend he is being, regardless of their relationship status. Nick is being a very good friend to Charlie, and I think that's what they both need, regardless of the romantic love aspects of the story. So in case you couldn't tell, this got 5 stars, and I am dying to get my hands on the next volume, which I will be purchasing in paperback, in physical copy. Then we have Murder Most Unladylike by Robin Stevens. This is the first in the Murder Most Unladylike series, a historical a historical middle grade mystery series following Daisy and Hazel. Now, before I go any further into this, there are aspects of racism, racial slurs towards Hazel, as she is a Chinese immigrant, and this is set in the 1930s. So just be wary of that going in, and it isn't really challenged. But I'm hoping that in the later books, as time progresses, that people realise that they can't treat Hazel, they can't say what they're saying to her. But so just be wary of that going in. So it did get 3 stars. It was very interesting. I did enjoy it. Basically, Daisy and Hazel are students at Deepdean School for Girls, which is a boarding school, and this is set in the 1930s. They set up a secret detective agency, and until now haven't really had any true mystery crime to solve. That is until Hazel discovers the dead body of one of their teachers, Miss Bell. But when she and Daisy return, the body has disappeared. So there are two mysteries. They have to solve the murder of Miss Bell, and they also have to prove that there was actually a murder. And I did find this very, I don't think cute is the right word, but precocious. I love Daisy. She's that child. There's always one in every class, isn't there? She's that kid who is very boisterous, very sure of themselves, maybe a little bit of a bully, but you can't help but love her anyway. And Hazel is the unwitting sidekick who may be a little bit smarter than Daisy. And I do like, there is a part right near the end where, I don't want to give too much spoilers, but Daisy realises just how good of a friend Hazel is, and they do have a bit of a sweet moment in context to the rest of the book. So 3 stars. It would be 4, but the racial slurs, yes, okay, they are in context for the historical aspect of it, for the time frame, but for a modern day audience, I think they need to be challenged just a tad bit more, because Hazel does internally challenge it, but I think it needs to be said out loud. Hopefully in the sequels that is touched upon. And then we have, this is the book I started in Royal Readathon weekend and finished after, and this is Gods and Monsters by Shelby Mahurin. This is the conclusion to the Serpent and Dove trilogy. Now, as this is a sequel, I can't talk too much about it, but basically in Serpent and Dove we meet Lou, who is a witch on the run from her past, and then we meet Reed. Now Reed is a witch hunter, a chasseur I think they're called. This is very French. So we meet Reed and Lou, and through circumstance they are married. Now Reed has no idea that Lou is a witch, but Lou knows what Reed is. And this just sort of follows their misadventure as they fall in love, as they learn some secrets and beat the bad guy, who turns out to be someone who is a very evil piece of work. And I know she's not real, but Morgan terrifies the life out of me. But this got a 4 star. This got 4 stars. I did find it's probably me more than the book, because I did leave probably too long of a gap between Blood and Honey and Gods and Monsters. But I was lost in places, and I may have been a slightly bit bored. But I did like the ending. I did think it wrapped up nicely. Personally, I think this, even though they are quite chunky books, they do read fairly quick, and I think you're probably best off binging them or reading them shortly after each other, because some of the minor details were forgettable. But this is a junk food book, I think. It's not memorable in any... I'll probably forget this by the end of the month. But it was a fun time. I did enjoy it when I read it, but it's not particularly memorable as a whole. But again, that could be a me thing rather than a book thing, because like I say, I did leave a bit of a gap between Blood and Honey and Gods and Monsters. And then the last book I read for this little mini wrap-up thing, this recent reads, this group of 7, is Gilded by Marissa Meyer, and I literally finished it the morning I'm filming this, and this got 4 stars again. Now, Gilded is a dark retelling of Rumpelstiltskin following Serilda, who is cursed by the god of lies, are all of her tales as false as they appear. And Serilda has a bit of a reputation in her village, which feels very German. It is a fantasy world, but the characters and the setting names they feel German to me. They have that sort of German-esque language. I'm probably wrong, and I apologise to any Germans watching, but that's just my interpretation. But that doesn't detract from it too much. But we follow Serilda, who, on the eve of a wild hunt, discovers two moss maidens, these creatures, and hides them from the rest of the hunt in her onion cellar. Now they return her kindness with some gold, and then the Ill King, who is a bit of a bad guy, obviously comes across Serilda and asks her what she's doing out in the middle of the night. She tells the famous Rumpelstiltskin lie, I can turn straw into gold, and it goes from there. Now the king believes her, and the theme of Serilda being believed for the outlandish lies but not the truth is something that is expanded upon, and it is repeated in the novel. But he believes her, and then on the next full moon, because these dark ones can only escape their side of the veil on full moons, so he calls for Serilda and he tests her by making her spin straw into gold. This is when Gilded comes into it. Now he is a bit of a poltergeist character, and he is the Rumpelstiltskin character in this retelling. He spins the straw into gold, and he takes payment in the form of the necklace that she was given by the Moss Maidens, then the ring, and then the fairy tale aspect comes into it. But this flips it on its head, because as the Rumpelstiltskin myth, story, whatever you want to call it, is the backbone of this, but we also have the idea that because Serilda was blessed by the god of storytellers and lies, what has that done to her abilities? Because she is god blessed, you can see fairly clearly. But yeah, this got 4 stars. There were things that I just didn't gel with. Again, I felt a bit bored, but it could be because this was more romance than fantasy. But that's the 7 books I read. Now, the book I bought on Kindle is Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout, the sequel to From Blood and Ash, which I did read. I read it in May, so unfortunately there's no wrap-up because I'm not doing them. But if you don't know, From Blood and Ash is the story of Poppy, who is a maiden. She's supposed to be pure and untouched, and she sneaks out, meets her god Hawk, and things go from there. Now, I did enjoy that. Fair enough, I know the series now has some criticisms, but I just read it for a good time, and From Blood and Ash was. So A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire is the sequel, and it picks up, from what I've heard, it picks up from where From Blood and Ash left off, and I think it is a bit more chunky than the first book, which tends to be the case with sequels, isn't it? Because the first book, you set up the overarching plot, the characters, you get people moving, and then the second book is where you have to introduce the main conflict again. And yeah, second books tend to be bigger than the first books because there's more needed from them, in my experience, opinion, whatever. So hopefully that gave you some ideas of how to curb your, well, if you do, hopefully that gave you some ideas on possibly a new challenge to do, and give you some reading, more reading in-depth reviews. I don't know what I'm saying. But yeah, I'm enjoying this 7x1 because it means I can track it, and I am reducing my TBR by at least 6 each month, provided I stay with this. And this was meant to be a short video. I've already told for half an hour. Imagine how long it would have been if I did a full month's wrap up this way. But that's it. That's a good time to stop this video. So that's it for this video. Give it a like if you like it, and hit that subscribe button if you want to see this, talk about these, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.